Under the fractured moon of the Academy's spires, a single snowflake fell like a forgotten vow, melting against skin that knew no warmth. Ilara's boots crunched through the frost-kissed courtyard, each step a defiance against the weight of eyes that followed her like shadows in the storm. The Alpha Academy loomed behind her, its towers of pale stone piercing the night sky, etched with runes that glowed faintly under the lunar veil. Whispers trailed her, soft at first, then swelling into the low growl of judgment. Wolfless, they called her, the word a blade honed by years of tradition. Every student here, from the youngest pups to the crowned heirs, had felt the awakening, the inner beast uncoiling in their blood, fierce and loyal, binding them to the pack's unyielding hierarchy. But Ilara? She was the anomaly, the Omega-born baron of that primal fire, her veins echoing with silence where others heard the thunder of pause. Rejection had come not in fury, but in the quiet cruelty of indifference. The elders had gathered at dawn, their faces masks of stern piety, invoking the Deuce's ancient laws. Without your wolf, you cannot claim a place among us, the High Alpha had intoned, his voice like wind scraping over ice. The pack thrives on strength, on the bond that unites fang and fur. You are adrift. No ceremony, no ritual scar to mark her exile, just a decree, cold as the mountain winds that now whipped through the open gates. They had stripped her of her dormitory key, her training garb, even the simple iron ring that signified her enrollment. Left with only a threadbare cloak and the chill seeping into her bones, Ilara was cast out, not to die in the wilds, but to wander the fringes of the world that had deemed her unworthy. The snow deepened as she crested the ridge overlooking the valley, the Academy's lights flickering like distant stars, swallowed by the encroaching dark. Her breath came in ragged clouds, tasting of pine and regret. Why her? The question had haunted her since childhood, when the other Omegas shifted under the full moon, their forms blurring into graceful wolves that romped through the moonlit glades. Ilara had waited, prayed to the Deusa in the shadowed alcoves of the temple, offering drops of her blood on altars of frost-veined marble. But nothing stirred within her, no heat, no howl, no savage joy. Instead, there was this: quiet power, an intuition that prickled at the edges of her mind, guiding her through the labyrinth of the Academy's politics like an unseen thread. She had sensed betrayals before they bloomed, felt the undercurrents of ambition in the Alpha's gazes. It was why the lesser packs had begun to listen to her counsel, why even the professors paused when she spoke truths they dared not voice. But power without a wolf. It was heresy, a crack in the foundation of their world. A gust tore at her cloak, revealing the one possession they had not taken, a silver locket nestled against her chest like a secret heartbeat. It had been her mother's, passed down through generations of Omega healers, its surface etched with lunar phases that seemed to shift in the moonlight. Inside, a lock of fur, wolf-gray and soft, reminded her of what she lacked, or perhaps what she was meant to transcend. Ilara clutched it now, the metal warming faintly under her palm, as if it sensed her unraveling. The wind carried distant weavos from the Academy's heart, a chorus of triumph and belonging that twisted like a knife in her gut. She was no longer part of that song. Descending into the valley, the terrain grew treacherous, jagged rocks hidden beneath the snow, like the hidden resentments of those she had left behind. The air thickened with the scent of damp earth and smoldering wood, remnants of a border fire perhaps, or the ritual pyres where failed initiates met their end. Ilara's legs burned, her body unaccustomed to the wild's embrace without the pack's protection. Memories flooded her, the rejection's aftermath in the great hall, where alphas had averted their eyes, their wolves whining softly in empathy they could not afford to show. The beta girls, her one-time friends, had offered pitying smiles, but their loyalty lay with the hierarchy. And the King Alpha himself, Thorn, with his storm-gray eyes and the weight of the crown that aged him beyond his years, had not spoken. He had simply nodded, his silence the final seal on her banishment. What strength was there in mercy, she wondered, if it demanded the sacrifice of one's place? The Deuce's teachings spoke of destiny as a revelation, not a birthright, yet here she was, adrift in the cold, her spirit fraying like the hem of her cloak. The locket pulsed again, a subtle warmth against the encroaching freeze, urging her onward. Far below, the forest whispered secrets in the rustle of branches heavy with ice, a labyrinth of shadows where exiles like her might find solace or perdition. As the moon climbed higher, casting silver veins across the snow, Ilara paused at the forest's edge. A low growl echoed from the depths, not of the Academy's wolves, but something wilder, wounded. Her intuition flared, a silent alarm in the void where her beast should have been. Friend or foe? The night held its breath, and in that suspended moment, Ilara felt the first stirrings of a purpose beyond rejection, a thread pulling her into the unknown, where the girl without a wolf might yet command the storm. The growl reverberated through the trees like a fracture in the earth's frozen heart, pulling Ilara deeper into the shadowed embrace of the forest. She froze, her fingers tightening around the locket, its silver edges biting into her palm as if to anchor her against the surge of instinct that should not exist within her. No wolf stirred in her blood, yet something primal uncoiled, a quiet vigilance, sharp as the wind slicing through the pines. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood, mingling with the crisp bite of snow and the faint, acrid smoke of a dying fire. Her breath misted before her, each exhale a fragile defiance against the cold that clawed at her exposed skin. She moved forward, silent as a ghost in the drifts, her boots sinking into the powder that muffled the world. The moon filtered through the canopy in fractured beams, painting the underbrush in silver and black, where roots twisted like veins beneath the ice. The growl came again, closer now, laced with pain, a ragged edge that spoke of pursuit, of wounds that festered in the dark. Ilara's heart pounded, a solitary drum in the silence where pack howls should have joined it. Fear coiled in her gut, but curiosity burned brighter, an unbidden pull toward the source. What exile shared this wild margin with her? A rogue, perhaps, or one of the Academy's outcasts, driven mad by the moon's indifferent gaze. The path narrowed, branches laden with frost brushing her shoulders like accusatory whispers. She emerged into a small clearing, where moonlight pooled like spilled mercury over a figure slumped against a gnarled oak. He was massive even in collapse, his broad frame clad in the remnants of Academy leathers, torn and bloodied. The insignia of the crown frayed at the collar. Thorn. The King Alpha himself, his storm-gray eyes half-lidded in exhaustion, one arm clamped over a gash across his ribs that wept crimson onto the snow. His wolf's form had abandoned him here, or perhaps he had forced it back, the beast's power too volatile in his weakened state. Steam rose from the wound, the heat of his blood defying the chill, and the air thrummed with the low rumble of his labored breathing. Ilara's world tilted. This was no mere wanderer. It was the architect of her silence, the one whose nod had sealed her fate without a word. Betrayal flickered in her chest, hot and unyielding, mingling with the instinctive draw of his presence. An Alpha's aura that pressed against her senses like a tide, demanding submission she had never granted. She should flee, let the forest claim him as it would her, yet her feet rooted in place. The locket warmed against her skin, its lunar etching seeming to pulse in rhythm with his faltering pulse. Why him? Why now, when the Academy's gates still echoed with her rejection? He stirred, his head lifting with a grimace that revealed the sharp lines of his face, etched deeper by shadows and suffering. His eyes found hers, piercing through the night, and for a moment the world narrowed to that gaze, gray as gathering storms, holding depths of guilt that mirrored her own isolation. "You," he rasped, voice gravel rough, laced with surprise and something darker, like recognition of a forbidden truth. Blood trickled from his lips, staining the snow at his feet in dark petals, and the wind carried the scent of it to her, iron-rich and alive. Alara stepped back, her cloak catching on a thorned branch, tearing a strip free like a shed skin. Fear warred with the curiosity that had always been her quiet weapon, the intuition that let her navigate the Academy's treacherous politics, sensing alliances fracture before they snapped. "Stay away," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction, trembling on the edge of the clearing. The connection sparked unbidden, a thread of empathy weaving through the void in her soul, drawn to the fracture in his. She could feel the weight of his curse, not the wound alone, but the deeper rot, the betrayal that had driven him from the pack, whispers of a rival's poison in the council halls, a coup veiled in piety to the Deusa. He was marked by it, the King Alpha fleeing his own throne, his honor bleeding out with every drop. Thorn pushed himself upright, wincing as fresh blood seeped through his fingers. Alara, the wolfless Omega. The words hung between them, not mockery, but a weary acknowledgement, his gaze tracing her form as if seeing her anew, not as the anomaly they had cast out, but as a beacon in the storm. The moon watched, impassive, its light glinting off the locket she clutched like a talisman. He extended a hand, not in command, but in plea, the gesture raw, stripped of his crown's authority. "They're coming, the traitors. They think me fallen. Help me, or leave me to the snow." Her mind raced, rationalizing the pull she felt, the instinctive bond that Omegas were meant to deny, especially to one who embodied the hierarchy that broke her. This was madness. Aiding him could drag her back into the web of politics and power she had barely escaped. Yet the curiosity deepened, born of the shared exile, the mutual wound of rejection. The forest seemed to hold its breath, Weavos distant now, echoing from the Academy like mournful sirens. She could smell the smoke on him, the remnants of a skirmish fire, taste the tension in the air thick as fog. What was strength, if not choosing connection over the safety of solitude? Hesitation fractured as shadows stirred at the clearing's edge, pursuers, their forms blurring with the promise of fangs and fury. Thorn's eyes met hers again, a silent vow in their depths, and Alara made her choice. She crossed the snow, kneeling beside him, her hands pressing against his wound with a steadiness she did not feel. The heat of his blood soaked through her fingers, vital and scorching, while the locket burned like a brand against her heart. In that touch, denial cracked, curiosity blooming into something perilously close to need, a bridge across the chasm of their broken worlds. The wind howled, carrying the first snarls of the enemy, and Alara whispered into the night, "We run, together." As they stumbled into the deeper woods, the moon veiled itself behind clouds, as if the Deusa herself mourned the fragile alliance forged in blood and frost. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The forest swallowed them whole, its branches clawing at the sky like desperate fingers, as Alara and Thorn plunged into the labyrinth of ice-sheathed pines. Her hand burned where it gripped his arm, slick with his blood that seeped through the torn leather, warm and insistent against the night's unrelenting bite. The snarls of the pursuers echoed behind, a chorus of betrayal that twisted through the trees, closer with every ragged breath. Thorn's weight dragged at her, his steps faltering on the uneven snow. But she pulled him onward, her intuition a silent compass in the void where her wolf should have guided her. The locket thrummed against her chest, its silver surface now smeared with crimson, as if it drank the evidence of their shared peril. They burst through a thicket into a narrow ravine where the wind howled like a forsaken spirit, whipping snow into blinding veils. Ilara's lungs ached, the cold searing her throat with each inhale, tasting of pine resin and the faint, coppery tang of his wound. She scanned the shadows, her senses sharpening, not with the feral acuity of a beast, but with that quiet knowing that had always set her apart. There, ahead, a cleft in the rock face, veiled by overhanging icicles that dripped like frozen tears. "In here," she urged, her voice a threadbare whisper against the gale. Thorn nodded, his gray eyes clouded with pain, yet flickering with a gratitude that pierced her defenses like moonlight through frost. They squeezed into the crevice, the stone walls closing around them like the Deuce's unyielding embrace, rough and unyielding against their backs. The space was cramped, barely wide enough for two, forcing their bodies close, his broad frame shielding her from the draft that seeped through the cracks. Ilara tore a strip from her cloak, the fabric ripping with a sound like muffled thunder, and bound his gash as best she could. The blood soaked through instantly, hot and viscous, staining her fingers in a ritual of unintended intimacy. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the alpha's vitality warring against the chill that gnawed at her bones. His breath ghosted over her hair, ragged and warm, carrying the scent of smoke and wild earth, remnants of the skirmish that had felled him. Outside, the snarls grew nearer, paws crunching through the snow in a relentless rhythm. Thorn tensed, his free hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there, his muscles coiling like a spring wound too tight. "They'll find us," he murmured, voice low and gravel-etched, laced with the melancholy of a king stripped bare. His eyes met hers in the dimness, shadows pooling in their depths, revealing fractures she had never seen in the Academy's halls, the guilt of commands that had cost lives, the weight of a crown forged in betrayal. He was no longer the distant sovereign, but a man haunted by the ghosts of his decrees, decisions that had exiled her, yes, but also driven him into this abyss. "You should have left me, an Omega without a wolf, aiding a fallen Alpha. It's folly." Ilara's hands stilled on the makeshift bandage, the warmth of his blood seeping into her skin like a forbidden mark. Resentment flared, sharp as the wind's edge. How dare he question her now, after his silence had condemned her? Yet empathy stirred unbidden, a quiet tide eroding her anger. She saw the wound not just in his flesh, but in his soul. The rival's poison, whispered in council chambers under the guise of piety, accusing him of weakness for sparing mercy where tradition demanded blood. He had chosen compassion once, sparing a traitor's life in the name of the Deuce's balance, and it had unraveled his reign. Now, here they were, two rejects bound by the same storm. "Folly," she echoed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "What is strength if not choosing to stand when the pack turns its fangs? You nodded to my exile, Thorn, but I see you now, broken like me." He winced, not from the pain, but from the truth in her words, his gaze dropping to the locket nestled between them, its lunar etchings catching a sliver of moonlight that pierced the crevice. The symbol seemed to pulse, drawing his attention, as if it whispered secrets of healing long denied. Outside, the pursuers circled, their howls fracturing the night. A pack of Academy enforcers, loyal to the usurper's lies, their breaths fogging the air in predatory clouds. One shadow loomed close, sniffing at the entrance, its eyes gleaming yellow in the gloom. Thorn shifted, positioning himself between Ilara and the threat, his body a barrier of resolve despite the blood loss sapping his strength. "Stay behind me," he growled softly, the Alpha's instinct surfacing, protective and raw. But Ilara did not cower. Her intuition surged, a silent map unfolding in her mind. The weak points in the stone, the wind's direction carrying their sense away. She pressed her palm to the rock wall, feeling the subtle vibrations of the approaching wolves, their intent as clear as blood on snow. "No," she said, her tone firm, laced with the authority she had honed in shadowed debates. We fight as one. With a surge of will, she dislodged a loose boulder above the entrance, sending it tumbling in a cascade of ice and stone. The crash echoed like thunder, blocking the crevice partially, buying them time as snarls turned to frustrated yips beyond the barrier. In the sudden hush, their eyes locked again, the air between them thickening with unspoken understanding. Thorn's hand covered hers on the bloodied cloth, his touch tentative, seeking permission in the dim light. The empathy that had sparked in the clearing deepened now, weaving through the fear, a bond forged not in instinct's fire, but in the deliberate choice to protect what the world had discarded. She felt it in the steadying rhythm of his breath, syncing with hers, in the way the locket's warmth spread between them, bridging the chasm of hierarchy and loss. He was marked by guilt, she by rejection, yet together, in this frozen sanctuary, they glimpsed redemption's fragile light. The howls retreated, for now, swallowed by the wind's mournful dirge, but the night pressed close, heavy with the promise of more trials. Ilara leaned against the stone, exhaustion pulling at her, yet a quiet resolve bloomed in her chest. What was destiny, if not this? Two souls, adrift and defiant, finding solace in the other's wound. Thorn's gaze lingered on her, soft with wonder, as the moon's veiled glow filtered through the cracks, illuminating the path ahead in silver whispers. But in that fragile peace, a deeper dilemma stirred. Could trust mend what betrayal had shattered? Or would it demand a sacrifice neither was ready to give? The forest held its breath, waiting for their next choice. The crevice's chill seeped into Ilara's bones like a lover's reluctant farewell, the stone walls pressing close in the dim afterglow of their makeshift barricade. Hours had blurred into a tense vigil, the distant howls fading into the wind's ceaseless lament, leaving only the rhythmic drip of melting ice and the faint crackle of Thorn's labored breaths. She sat with her back against the rough granite, knees drawn to her chest, the silver locket heavy against her skin, now a talisman stained with his blood, its lunar phases dulled to a somber patina. The warmth it had offered earlier had ebbed, mirroring the fragile truce between them, and in the quiet, her mind wandered treacherous paths, memories of the Academy's spires, where she had been invisible, a shadow among wolves, her counsel sought in whispers, yet denied in the light of day. Thorn shifted beside her, his massive form wedged into the space, the scent of his blood mingling with the earthy musk of sweat and pine. He had dozed fitfully, his head lolling against her shoulder in exhaustion, a vulnerability that stirred something deep within her, an ache not of pity but of recognition. His guilt was a palpable fog, clouding the air between them. She felt it in the way his fingers twitched in sleep, as if grasping for a scepter lost to treachery. The rival's poison had not been mere rumor, she sensed now, whispers in the council that painted him as weak, his mercy toward a defeated pack, a flaw in the Diusa's iron code. And she, the wolfless Omega, had been the first casualty of that unraveling, her exile a signal to the doubters that even the King Alpha bowed to tradition's blade. As dawn's pale light filtered through the cracks, gray and unforgiving, Ilara's eyes fluttered open to the weight of his gaze upon her. Thorn watched her with an intensity that stripped away the night's defenses, his storm-gray eyes searching her face as if mapping constellations in unfamiliar skies. "You saved me," he said softly, his voice a rumble like thunder retreating over mountains, laced with the melancholy of one who had commanded legions yet found himself adrift. "Why? After what I allowed. Your banishment was my silence, Ilara, a king's failing." She turned her face away, the cold stone biting into her cheek, tasting salt on her lips from unshed tears. Rejection's scar throbbed anew, a wound deeper than flesh, but in his admission a bridge formed, tentative, forged in the fire of shared isolation. "Because I know betrayals bite," she replied, her words measured, carrying the weight of years spent navigating the Academy's veiled daggers. "The Diusa does not gift wolves to all, yet she whispers truths to those who listen. I heard the fractures in your court long before they broke you, sparing that traitor. It was compassion, not weakness, but the pack fears what it cannot control." He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, calloused fingers scarred from battles long past, before withdrawing as if burned by the intimacy. The air hummed with unspoken tension, the locket pulsing faintly against her chest, a silent witness to the vulnerability unfolding. Outside, the wind stirred the snow into eddies, carrying faint weavos that spoke of the pursuers regrouping, their scents lingering like ghosts on the breeze. Thorn's wound had clotted under her crude binding, but fever simmered in his veins, his skin hot to the touch when she checked it, a fever born of blood loss and the curse of his unraveling reign. "You see too much," he murmured, a note of awe threading his tone. "In the Academy, they called you wolfless, but there was always something. A quiet that commanded respect, even from alphas. I ignored it, bound by duty. Now, it may be our only salvation." Ilara closed her eyes, the words stirring the void within her, that eternal silence where her beast should prowl. But as the fever's heat radiated from him, mingling with the locket's subtle thrum, a shift occurred, a deepening of her intuition, no longer a mere prickle, but a floodgate cracking open. Visions unspooled in her mind's eye, not wild and feral like a wolf's hunt, but crystalline and inexorable. Paths through the ravine leading to hidden caves where ancient runes glowed under moonlight, symbols of the Diusa's forgotten healers, Omegas like her, pathfinders who guided without fangs. She saw the rival's face, sharp and ambitious, his hand dipping into a vial of shadowed elixir during the council's rite, poisoning Thorn's chalice under the guise of offering. And deeper still, a revelation. Her blood mingled with his on the locket, unlocking a bond that could cleanse the curse, revealing her as the key to his redemption, not through submission, but through the power of sight denied to wolves. Her breath hitched, eyes snapping open to find Thorn staring, his own gaze widening as if he sensed the surge. The locket burned now, hot as embers, its silver surface gleaming with an inner light that cast ethereal patterns on the stone walls, lunar phases aligning in a dance of prophecy. "Ilara," he whispered, voice thick with wonder and dawning realization, his hand finally closing over hers, the contact electric, sending tremors through her core. Blood from his wound smeared fresh onto the locket, and in that mingling, the visions sharpened. She was no anomaly, but the Diusa's chosen vessel, her wolfless state a veil for the greater gift of foresight, the pathfinder who could lead him back to his throne, mending the fractures with truths only she could unearth. Tears traced cold paths down her cheeks, the weight of it crashing over her like an avalanche, rebirth from rejection, her silence not emptiness but a sacred quiet. Yet doubt coiled beneath the awe. Was this destiny's grace or a crueler chain, binding her to the very hierarchy that had cast her out? Thorn's grip tightened, his eyes reflecting the locket's glow, seeing her not as the exiled Omega, but as the fulcrum of his fate. "You are the key," he breathed, the words a vow etched in the air between them, heavy with the promise of trials yet to come. The wind outside rose to a howl, as if the Diusa herself affirmed it. But in Ilara's heart, the revelation birthed a spiritual schism. To embrace this power meant forgiving the past, or risking the destruction of both their worlds in the name of freedom. The crevice trembled faintly, snow sifting through the cracks like whispered warnings, and in that suspended breath, Ilara wondered, what was true strength, if not wielding a gift that demanded the heart's surrender? The moon, hidden yet ever watchful, cast its silver judgment, urging her toward a choice that could crown mercy over vengeance or shatter them anew. like if you believe rejection can become destiny. The ravine's mouth spat them out into a world reborn in peril, the dawn's feeble light bleeding across the snow like a wound hastily stanched. Alara's legs trembled beneath her, the revelation's weight still thrumming in her veins, a current that made the locket pulse against her chest like a second heart. Thorn walked beside her now, his stride steadier with the fever's retreat, though shadows clung to his eyes, guilt's indelible ink, etched deeper by the truths she had unveiled. The forest had given way to the Academy's outer fringes, where ancient wards hummed faintly in the earth, their runes flickering like dying embers under the thinning frost. But the air carried a darker promise, the pack's scent, thick and accusatory, laced with the rival's metallic ambition. They crested a ridge overlooking the valley, the Academy's spires rising like jagged teeth against the paling sky, their stone facades scarred by the night's skirmishes, smoke curling from breached walls, distant howls fracturing the morning hush. Alara's breath caught, a vice tightening around her ribs. This was the heart of her rejection, the place where silence had been her verdict. The locket warmed, its silver surface catching the first rays, casting prismatic shards across the snow that danced like fleeting prophecies. She could feel the pull of it all, the Matilha's unyielding gaze, the traitor's web spun in shadowed halls, thorns past crashing against them like an avalanche long overdue. "We can't avoid it," Thorn murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the chill air, his hand brushing hers in a gesture both protective and hesitant. The contact sent sparks through her, the bond they had forged in the crevice now a living thing, insistent and raw. He scanned the horizon, his storm-gray eyes hardening with the resolve of a king reclaiming his shadow. The rival, Kyle, holds the council now. His lies paint me as cursed, forsaken by the Dusa. If we enter, it's judgment. For both of us. Alara's intuition flared, visions splintering her thoughts. Kyle's face, sharp as a blade, his wolf's form sleek and treacherous, whispering venom into the elder's ears under the moon's watchful eye. She saw the Matilha divided, loyalties fraying like the hem of her cloak, omegas and betas caught in the crossfire of ambition, and herself, the wolfless one, standing at the nexus. Her gift of foresight, a beacon that could expose the poison or ignite a war. Freedom whispered to her, a siren's call to vanish into the wilds, leaving the hierarchy to devour itself. But love, that resisted flame, tugged at her core, demanding she stand with him, redeem the silence that had bound them. The wind rose, carrying the first snarls from below, enforcers patrolling the perimeter, their paws churning the snow into bloody slush from recent clashes. Thorn tensed, his body coiling instinctively, the Alpha's fire rekindling despite the pallor of his skin. "Alara, go. You owe me nothing. Your exile was my failing. Don't let it chain you further." His words cut deeper than fangs, laced with the melancholy of duty's cruel arithmetic, love or the throne, compassion or the pack's survival. She met his gaze, seeing the fracture there, the king who had spared a traitor's life, only to invite this betrayal, now facing the moral precipice where mercy could crown him or bury them both. "No," she said, her voice steady as the earth's hidden pulse, though fear clawed at her throat like frostbitten thorns. The locket burned hotter, its lunar etching seeming to writhe, urging her forward. They descended, the snow yielding underfoot with treacherous crunches, each step a descent into the past's maw. The wards parted for them like reluctant sentinels, their hum faltering at Alara's approach as if recognizing the Pathfinder's touch. Figures emerged from the tree line, Academy guards, their eyes widening in shock at the sight of their fallen king, flanked by the banished Omega. Whispers rippled through them like wind over water, swelling into growls of confusion and accusation. At the courtyard's edge, the confrontation unfolded under the spire's looming shadow, the air thick with the scent of pine smoke and fresh blood from the night's toll. Kyle stepped forward, his form radiating false piety, clad in Thorn's stolen insignia, a crown of iron thorns glinting mockingly. His wolf's aura pressed like a storm front, demanding submission. But Ilara held her ground, the locket a shield against the tide. "Traitor," Kyle sneered, his voice silk over steel, eyes flicking to Thorn's bandaged side. "The Deusa has forsaken you, and now you drag this. Anomaly back? The wolfless whore who whispers heresies?" The Matilha gathered, a sea of furred and human forms, their howls a cacophony of doubt. Friends turned wary, elders invoking ancient laws with voices like cracking ice. Thorn stepped before her, his presence a bulwark. But Ilara pushed past, her hand finding the locket, its warmth surging as she channeled the visions. "Lies!" she declared, her words cutting through the din like moonlight piercing clouds. The air shimmered, her foresight manifesting in ethereal threads, images blooming in the minds of the assembly. Kale's hand in the chalice, the elixir's dark gleam, the rival's ambition devouring the pack from within. Gasps echoed, wolves shifting uneasily, the truth a blade twisting in their loyalties. Kale lunged, his form blurring into wolfish fury, fangs bared in a snarl that shook the stones. Thorn met him mid-leap, their bodies colliding in a whirlwind of claws and blood, the snow staining red beneath them. Ilara's heart thundered, the choice crystallizing. Intervene with her gift, binding her fate to his in forgiveness's forge, or withhold, claiming liberty at the cost of war's carnage. The Matilha circled, torn between old oaths and new deceits, Weavos rising in chaotic symphony. She clutched the locket, blood from a fresh scrape on her palm mingling with its silver, and the visions intensified, paths of peace through pardon, or rivers of blood in vengeance's name. As Thorn grappled, his gray eyes locking on hers amid the fray, Ilara whispered a prayer to the Deusa, the wind carrying it like a vow. Mercy or war? The locket blazed, illuminating the courtyard in silver fire, and in that blaze, she glimpsed the soul-deep dilemma. To heal his wound meant embracing the hierarchy's chains anew, or to walk free, letting the pack's fractures claim them all. The clash raged, blood arcing like crimson arcs under the rising sun, and Ilara's choice hung suspended, a moral fulcrum teetering on the edge of rebirth or ruin. What was power, if not the mercy to forgive the unforgivable, even as the fangs closed in? The moon's echo lingered in the daylight, a spiritual specter demanding her verdict. The courtyard erupted in a maelstrom of fur and fury. The snow churned to a crimson slurry beneath the colliding forms of Thorn and Kale, their snarls ripping through the dawn like the Deusa's own thunder. Ilara stood frozen at the epicenter, the locket searing her skin as if forged anew in the fire of choice, its silver chains a tether to the visions that now cascaded through her like blood in veins. The Matilha encircled them, a ring of shadowed eyes and bared fangs, their howls a fractured dirge, loyalty splintering under the weight of truths she had unveiled. Kale's sleek wolf form lunged again, claws raking Thorn's flank, reopening the wound that bound them, fresh blood spraying in hot arcs that steamed against the frost. Thorn countered with a roar that shook the spires, his massive frame a bulwark of raw power. Yet Ilara saw the falter in him, the guilt that sapped his strikes, the ethical core that stayed his killing blow even as betrayal demanded it. Her heart hammered, a solitary beat echoing the void where her wolf should rage, but the Pathfinder's gift surged unbidden, a torrent of foresight painting the precipice in stark relief. She glimpsed the rivers of blood if she withheld, Kale's triumph, the academy crumbling into warring factions, Thorn's body broken on the altar of mercy's cost, and the other path, luminous as moonlight on ice, union through sacrifice, her power weaving forgiveness into the pack's fractured soul, crowning compassion over vengeance. Freedom tempted, a whisper of wild solitudes beyond the wards, but love, that resisted rationalized flame, now blazed undeniable, demanding she step into the fray not as victim, but as redeemer. The wind whipped through the courtyard, carrying the metallic tang of blood and the acrid bite of fear sweat, snowflakes swirling like ash from a pyre yet unlit. "Alara!" Thorn's voice cut through the chaos, a guttural plea as Kale pinned him, jaws snapping inches from his throat. The Matilha surged closer, some shifting to intervene, others frozen in moral paralysis. The elders' chants invoking the Deusa's laws, their voices cracking like ice under pressure. She could taste the tension, thick as fog rolling from the mountains, feel the earth's pulse beneath her boots, urging resolution. The locket blazed brighter, its lunar etchings alive with inner fire, drawing the eyes of the assembly like moths to a forbidden flame. In that glow, her choice crystallized, not submission to hierarchy, but transcendence through it. Rejection had been her forge. Now, Renacimento called her to heal the wound that mirrored her own. With a cry that tore from her depths, raw, unyielding, Ilara thrust forward, palm slamming against the locket as blood from her scraped hand mingled once more with Thorn's essence. The silver erupted in a cascade of silver light, ethereal tendrils snaking outward like roots seeking soil, piercing the air with visions that bloomed for all to see. The Matilha gasped as the illusions solidified. Kyle's treachery replayed in vivid strokes, the poisoned chalice raised in false toast, the rival's whispers twisting piety into ambition, the Deusa's runes weeping blood in judgment. Kyle recoiled, his wolf form shimmering back to human in shock, eyes wide with the exposure of his soul's rot. Thorn rose, seizing the moment, but held his strike, his gray eyes locking on Alara's, a silent affirmation of the mercy they both embodied. The light intensified, coiling around Kyle like chains of frost, not to destroy, but to bind and reveal. He collapsed to his knees in the snow, the iron crown slipping from his brow, rolling through the slush to halt at Ilara's feet. The Matilha fell silent, the howls dying to breathless awe as her gift extended further. Threads of empathy weaving through the crowd, mending loyalties with glimpses of Thorn's unspoken burdens. The lives spared, the guilts borne in silence for the pack's fragile peace. Elders bowed their heads, tears tracing paths through frost on their cheeks, while Betas and Omegas stepped forward, their auras sinking in a chorus of rediscovered unity. Ilara felt it all, their pains, their doubts, flowing into her like a river meeting the sea, the void within filling not with a wolf's growl, but with the quiet sovereignty of the Pathfinder. Thorn staggered to her side, his hand finding hers amid the fading glow, the contact a vow etched in blood and light. Blood streaked his face, but his touch was gentle, the Alpha's fire tempered by the redemption she had ignited. "You chose us," he whispered, voice hoarse with wonder, the melancholy lifting like mist under sun. Not the throne, but the soul of it. She met his gaze, the storm-gray depths now clear, reflecting her own rebirth, no longer the wolfless exile, but the Omega who commanded without fangs, her love a bridge from rejection to reign. The locket cooled against her chest, its phases aligned in eternal cycle, a symbol of wounds healed through deliberate grace. The courtyard hushed, the wind softening to a sigh as the Matilha knelt, not in submission to power, but in reverence for the Deusa's revelation. Kyle was led away, not to execution, but to trial under the moon's impartial eye, mercy's chance for his own reckoning. Thorn drew Ilara close, his arm a shield against the lingering chill, their breaths mingling in clouds that rose like prayers. In that union, the Academy transformed, spires no longer teeth of judgment, but pillars of a new covenant, where strength bloomed from compassion's root. Ilara's spirit unfurled, the silence within now a sacred song. Destiny, not chain, but wings, freedom claimed through the heart's unyielding choice. As the sun crested the ridges, gilding the snow in gold, Alara stood with Thorn at the heart of it all, the Pax Vivos rising in harmonious renewal. What was Renascimento, if not this? Love as proof, redeeming the broken into wholeness under the Diusa's eternal watch. The locket rested quiet now, a gentle warmth, whispering of horizons yet unexplored, where every wound became a crown. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.